our first session of the day, which is managing your daily care and independence. We're going to talk about direct funding. We're going to talk about affordable and accessible housing. And we're going to talk about attendance services. Now, I'm really looking forward to this panel, who you can see on your screen right now. I will introduce them. Tori Lacey, who most of you probably have already met this morning, but just to give a quick recap, Tori was diagnosed with SMA. She works in the field of digital communications, doing social media management, graphic design, and some freelance writing. She has been on the direct funding program for 6 years and has had past experience with agency-provided attendance for her care and nursing. We also have Khalid Mahdi. Khalid was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and he holds a Master of Global Affairs from the Monk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto. Khalid also holds an honors degree Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and Political Science from the University of Toronto, and he was most recently called to the bar and has experience as it relates to direct funding. So thank you for joining us, Khalid. We have Brooklyn Marx, who was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. She works with individuals and families as they transition to parenthood. She manages their mental health, explores child behavior, and she has also a lot of personal experience and knowledge when it comes to direct funding. We have Natalie Timbrell. Natalie is one of the March of Dimes regional directors, who has a passion for transition work and the care that comes with that. And we have Danielle, Doust, and Leisa Debono. Danielle is an attendance service, is at the Attendance Service Application Center as the manager, and Leisa is a direct funding manager at the Center for Independent Living of Ontario, which you'll hear about in this. So without further ado, let's get to this. I'm really interested. Thank you all for joining us. I personally do not have a lot of experience in the funded attendant care, so I'm really looking forward to hearing all of your expertise on this. So thank you again. Let's just start it off right away, I guess. And we can go around the circle. Tori, maybe we'll start with you about some of the advantages to self-managed care over agency care, since you have experience with both. I know it's not for everyone, so if you'd like to expand on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I have been on the direct funding program for about 6 years now. I actually learned about it from Brooklyn when I was kind of exiting that phase of high school and working my way to move off to university. And I was kind of, feeling very frustrated, and I was expressing to Brooklyn and her mom that I wasn't sure what I was going to do, because I had experience with agency care kind of throughout high school, and I was super worried about how that was going to play out when I actually was moving out on my own. I find that in a lot of cases, agency care can be not only unreliable, because sometimes obviously agencies have staffing issues, but for me, I didn't find it a consistent or a personable process. Sometimes the agencies would send me people to get me up in the morning that I had never met before. And that kind of put a lot of stress on me because, if I was going to be away from my family, I didn't want some random person coming in that knew nothing about my care, knew nothing about how to safely manage my care, coming into my dorm room and saying, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm going to be getting you out of bed today." So for me, when I found out about self-managed care from Brooklyn, I was thrilled, because what this program allows you to do is actually hire and manage your attendance yourself. So I have now full control over who I hire, which means that the people that are in my life are people that I love spending time with. It's consistent now. I have the same staff. They usually stay with me for a very long time, because we have that chance to build that personal bond with each other. So, I mean, I think there are tons of advantages to self-managed care, which I'm sure some of the other panelists will talk about throughout the session. But for me, it was just having that autonomy of being able to choose who was going to be in my daily life every single day.
Very nice, thank you. Yeah, I've had the same experience myself with people coming into my house who I do not know who they are, and it's a little unsettling at the very least, let's say. And then how did you find the transition? And we'll open this up as well, and anybody jump in at any time. I'd like to make this more of a discussion than anything else between everybody. How did you find that transition from going from one to the other? Did you find it extremely difficult, or?
Yeah, I don't know about some of the other participants on this panel, but for me, I found it quite easy. I actually found it less stressful than dealing with some of the agency care that I had been provided with previously. Of course, with direct funding and self-managed care, you do have that responsibility of, you know, managing your attendance and hiring, and there's a lot more administrative responsibilities. But for me, those administrative responsibilities are so much less stressful than the stress of, is someone from the agency going to show up today? Am I going to like that person? Is that person going to safely carry out my care? So for me, it was actually quite an easy process, because I was just so relieved to actually have a better option for my care.
I was wondering if Brooklyn or Khalid want to jump in here maybe as well, to add anything. So
sure, I'll chime in.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so as you guys already know, so I've been on direct funding since 2017. So I'm a fairly new person to the program. I guess I'm 4 years in, so I mean, not so new, but you know. So you know, prior to that, you know, I was in Toronto getting care from the CCAC, from Product Information Center. And, you know, one of the things that I noticed was the biggest challenge in my care was just the limitations of, you know, what staff are able to do. I find with direct funding, staff are able to do much more for me. You know, getting meals prepped, you know, really doing anything that I need them to do. Right. And obviously you develop a contract with the employee, right? And the responsibilities that the employee is, you know, does for you under the contract, right? And so, you know, it gives you that much more ability just to do things on your own, right? You know, it's a big difference not to have your parents fold your laundry anymore, or not to have your parents, you know, have to, you know, sleep with you all night. You know, direct funding literally just turned that around for me. I can tell you that, you know, just, you know, on agency care, you're given like 1 hour in the morning, you're given like, you know, little things like that. And you can't live like that, to be honest. It's a challenge, you know, and I think direct funding resources like that really just, they're great for the community. I think they allow us to be a bit more independent. They allow us to live the life we want to live. You know, there are no limitations to what staff can do. Sure, there are challenges. You know, sure, there are staffing concerns you have to deal with. You know, you're the employer at the end of the day. But I think with all that, you know, all those responsibilities, there are benefits that, you know, that are there. And I think, you know, I would recommend anybody to try and get on direct funding or self-managed care. I think, you know, one of the benefits you'll see is that, you know, you're able to get out, you're able to do more. I mean, you know, I have attendants. I tell them, guys, meet me at the mall. I want to go to the mall today. You know, I schedule that with them, right? Meet me at work. You know, it's literally me and the attendant. There's no middle person, right? I deal directly with them. That's one of the other benefits, is that you're really, as you know, Tori mentioned, you're really developing a good relationship with the people that you employ, right? You know, I have somebody who lives in the area. She's literally down the street from me. and it works out perfectly, I can rely on her even in emergencies. She's willing to help out. Wonderful lady, and I really enjoy working with the people that I work with.
Brooklyn, did you want to jump in too?
Yeah, so in terms of the transition, I went on to direct funding in 2015, early 2015, and I had already been living on my own in university for 3 years at that time. So I was using agency services up until that point. So I got a really good glimpse as to what independent living looks like with agency versus with self-managed care. And that was one of the biggest things. It weirdly enough, the transition was only about a month. And even though, like Tori said, like there was a lot of more administration stress and, trying to navigate that during school was something unique, but it was still far less stressful than the stress of who's getting me up, who's coming into my home, are they going to do things properly, am I going to get injured, what's happening. And that was something that was a long-term stress for me because I was on my own for 3 years with that. So for me, the transition was quite smooth and far easier and definitely worth it. And then in terms of the actual program, I find it's, Tori used the word autonomy, and that is exactly what is the big takeaway that I've found, is that you have far more autonomy over your own life. You have far more ability to, direct your care, whatever that might look like. And, Khalid said the same thing with being able to go to the mall or being able to go grocery shopping and not have to have other people who are your workers. I used to have my friends take me because I didn't have any other way to get to the grocery store. And so now it's like, oh, well, like I can have my workers come and take me, and I can compensate them for my time, for their time, and actually be able to do it in a way that feels good for me. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that it's really opened up a lot more opportunities. And in doing so, it's also opened up much more autonomy and control over my own life. And I think that's something that every adult deserves to have the right to be able to direct their life. And that's something that the program has really been amazing in helping. So I've been trying, Tori was one of the ones that as soon as I transitioned, I was like, girl, you got to get on this. Like, it's so, I knew that she was going to school, and it's just something that I wish I had my very first year to make that experience so much better. And so I always encourage anyone transitioning into adulthood to really consider this program, consider other programs that do self-directed care. I don't think there's any other ones in Ontario, but perhaps in other provinces, I'm not sure. But I just think it's a much better fit for independent living. So
awesome, thanks. So I mean, there's 3 stories right there, or 3 different takes on it that all kind of come down to the same thing, and it all sounds really great. But I'm gonna throw this one to Danielle, Leisa, Natalie. Maybe you can jump into so the transition is great, but in terms of getting to this point, in terms of applying to direct funding and to have self-managed care, I'm just wondering if any of you would like to jump in and say, where should you start? Where should somebody who's just heard this for the first time go now? What should they do?
So my name is Leisa Debono, and I'm the manager of the direct funding program run through the Centre for Independent Living in Toronto. And if you are interested in applying, the first thing that we would recommend is that you go to the website, which is www.dfontario.ca. And you can download the application, submit it. The wait times between the time that you submit an application and you receive your eligibility interview is 12 to 18 months right now. The time between an eligibility interview, if you are eligible, and the time that you could begin in the program would be a minimum of 1 month and a maximum of 12. Once you sort of have an agreement for about 12 months, then if you haven't started, then usually we'll add some extra processes, meet with you again, make sure everything's still the same. So the wait time generally is about 12 to 18 months, but By the time that you've submitted your application for about 15, 16 months, we will contact you, depending on where you are in the province. You'll work with the representative that is in that province, or that is in that area of the province, and they'll work with you for a couple of months to help you get ready for the interview. So ask you mock questions and provide you with study materials, all that sort of thing. Your screen is. So if oh no, maybe not. No, there we go.
Sorry, Lisa, I think I was able to go ahead and meet the person. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So that essentially is the process. It's about a 12 to 18 month process, but there is lots of assistance. So anybody that has any questions, if you go on the direct funding website and you look for the contact person in your area, they are more than happy to walk you not only through the completion of the application, but also when it's time to get ready for your interview, they will assist you to prepare for that interview so that you understand your needs and what a schedule looks like and what the budget that is associated with those hours should look like.
Very nice.
If I could jump in and add to that, just
For sure.
My perspective. So yeah, so how it works is you fill out your application, you have to put down, what hours you need, what kind of care you're currently receiving, what you need, what you need for each shift. And I think one of the things I want people to know is that you have to essentially put down everything you need to be able to live on your own, right? So if you need, if you have respiratory devices, you got to make sure you write that down. If you've got if you need meal prep, if you need, really, you got to think of, make sure you get down everything that you need, right? And because I think in the interview, as far as I can remember, they will sit down with you and go over that. What do you need? And work with you to kind of develop that schedule and those hours that you will be getting from the program. As correct me if I'm wrong, Leisa, but I think applicant gets a certain number of hours that they're allotted, and that's what their budget is made of. And then I think once that's established during the interview, you have to, I guess you'll sit down and work that out with the direct funding staff. And one of the things that I will tell you is that direct funding staff are great. If you have any issues, anything comes up, you just give them a ring, you shoot an email, and they'll be able to help you out. Particularly in the beginning, they'll help you out in terms of giving you tips of finding attendance, anything you need to know, essentially, to get going. I will admit that when I first started, it wasn't necessarily the easiest process. It was there were some bumps and turns, and I think that's natural, and I think that's what I want people to know is that it might be a bit tough in the beginning to get used to what you need to do. You need a bookkeeper, you need stuff considering payroll, you need to start thinking about hiring, all those things come to mind. And I will admit, it was a little bit, a lot of information to gather at the beginning, right? And I think, going through it, you learn to develop a system that works for you. You have a good bookkeeper. I mean, I'm unfortunately on my second bookkeeper. I mean, things didn't work out with the first one, but things, worked out well now, and the system is developed, right? They have a way of doing so. I will just say, and I'll give the floor to everyone else, but the direct funding, their team they're great. They're there to help, and a lot of them also have experience with the program themselves, so they know the things in and out. So I would keep that in mind.
I'm hoping that Natalie or Danielle can maybe jump in here a little bit and kind of, I guess, elaborate on that a little more. Maybe even what other kind of help there is to get this process going and whatnot, or if there's anything else you'd like to add to Khalid.
Well, I guess I could jump in. I'm the manager of the Attendant application application center. I always get that acronym a little messed up, so apologize. early Saturday morning. So from what I heard from the panelists, and something that struck me was that you were all students. when you were getting direct funding. I think that direct funding is a great option for students. You can go through the application center and apply for student support as well. So just to kind of give you a differentiation between DF and direct funding and the service providers. So it's like the agencies, like they were saying. We take applications for people seeking services with the service providers, either through supportive housing or outreach. You know, some will say benefits are you don't have to be an employer, you don't have to manage all of that, and for some that's for them. But being a student, you can apply specifically for student services. You can apply when you put in an application, you can specify that you're a student and just look for support as a student. And then that will go out to agencies that can provide staffing for student services. So that one is typically if you apply as a student, it's a little more of a priority to get you in touch with service, because you know we want to have someone in there for when you start your schooling. In terms of everything else, there's supportive housing, there's outreach. There are, again, a lot of people in a lot of different situations when it comes to independent living, and some prefer to have the 24-hour support of living in a supportive housing unit. You're probably less likely to, you have all different staff, but usually they're typically all the same staff that come in to work with you, but some prefer that as well. So if you were to go on to the SILT website, you would go under ASAC, ASAC, and you can find the application there. You would fill out the application, send it in, and then you would get a call from us, and we would just go through some eligibility questions, which is basically you're over the age of 16, you have a valid health card, just that kind of stuff, and then the types of support that you need. So and then you would get interviewed for the wait list. So depending on your situation, depending on the wait list, depending on the vacancies that are trying to be filled, will determine how quickly you get into service. So
what kind, if you don't mind me jumping in, what kind of wait lists are we looking at currently, typically? Do we have any kind of?
So it's there is a substantial wait list, but you have, I guess there's a lot of determining factors. So it's not a chronological list. It's not like, well, I applied, so I'm 6 on the list, right? It's not how it works. How it works is, the aim is to try to service people, as many people as possible, but the service providers will have certain criteria that they need to fill a vacancy, whether you're male or female, for instance, how much care hours you need, all of that sort of thing. And then there's an interview process for that. It is really hard to say how long you would sit on a wait list, because it all depends on whether a vacancy comes up, which they don't come up all the time because there's just not a huge amount of funding for supportive housing. And then, depending on your situation, how urgent is it? Like I said, students typically, we try to, because it's kind of a little different, right? We would usually, it would go pretty quickly.
Perfect. I'm going to just jump along a little bit here, as we did have a question come in that I think either Leisa or I think Natalie, one of you two can take this. Hi, Natalie. We haven't really heard from you in a little bit, so just thought I'd say hello and make sure you're still there. But
Thank you. No.
Perfect. Somebody was wondering about how they go about finding support workers to hire. If somebody can speak maybe to the challenges of that, some tips, some some suggestions, anything like that, if one of you or both of you even could maybe help with that.
I wonder if I wanted to provide an opportunity just from March of Dimes Canada and representing the attendant services sector that Danielle had mentioned, and one of the service providers essentially that support with attendant care for individuals in their home, community, and at school. So we do support students in a university and post-secondary setting, and definitely position ourselves by collaborating with individuals with lived experience. So students who have been through wanting to have an attendant support their care, so that they have the best start, so that they can plan, they can be independent in their home, independent in school as much as possible. We definitely employ attendants and navigate with pediatric providers to collaborate on partnerships and relationship building so that we can help the students who are maybe not used to directing an attendant learn how to communicate and advocate for themselves, and have that touch base, not only in our post-secondary scenarios, but also in and within home. So being able to have that, communication, that growth as a youth into adulthood, as Jeffrey was saying, is definitely key and something that, we collaborate on. Finding and retaining employees is something that we really invest in. We want to be an employer of choice. We want our staff to be proud with what they, where they work and how and whom they serve in the sense, and that it's a collaborative approach, so that we're accountable as well, and we're having that conversation with the individual that we support. So we do our best to employ and retain in these times, and also to uphold values, our purpose, and our mission. So Leisa, directly to, I guess, the direct funding question that Jared had asked, I think you're the best to respond to that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, Jared. Thanks,
Okay.
Natalie. And actually, I wanted to say, because recruiting is the biggest question, and I want to tell you all that when the program began back in 1994, the very first pilot people said, what happens when somebody doesn't show up? Because somebody's not going to show up. Absolutely. That's what happens to me now. What do I do? And we said, I don't know. Let's build in agency services because we want to make sure that everything's okay. The reality though is, and Tori, Brooklyn, and Khalid can speak much better to this than I, but it doesn't actually happen very often. When you are employing your own people, those people know if they don't show up, there's not an agency that they can call and say somebody else is going to show up. You don't get out of bed. And that relationship tends to make it a better, more solid relationship. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it happens, but it happens at a far less frequency than it does with individuals. And I know a couple hundred people for whom it's never happened. Okay, so there is that difference. Okay, but I also wanted to say that one of the other differences between one of the other advantages of being on direct funding is you do not have to hire somebody with certification. So they have to be legally allowed to work in Canada, but they don't have to be a PSW. The next door neighbor who's got a great attitude and you really like him, they can come and give you a hand, right? So you have a much greater resource. But we just held Zoom calls across the province, and one of the great advantages we heard is if you have a relationship with a service provider in your area, if you know March of Dimes, they might, and especially if you have a good relationship, they might have interviewed somebody who doesn't have the great qualifications, and so they couldn't hire them. But you know what? It was an okay person. And that kind of relationship has actually fostered people being able to hire individuals. Other than that, there's a whole variety of ways. We actually have a website available to self-managers of where you can look to find staff. And it includes all of your online, Facebook and Kijiji and Craigslist and Indeed and HRDC. There's a variety of places you can find staff. Smaller communities in Ontario, they are struggling to find staff, but we have not had anybody on direct funding who has, for example, had to, move into a hospital or a long-term care facility simply because they couldn't find staff. That has never happened. So I'm not saying it might not happen, but to this point in time, people have been able, through word of mouth and all of the ways that you would think of, to find staff. But certainly our staff are there to provide assistance. Many of the independent living centers across Ontario keep lists of attendants when they hear names. Also on the direct funding, on the CILT website, Centre for Independent Living in Toronto, there is an attendant roster where people put their names. It's a little on date, but the idea is very, very solid.
Perfect. Thank you.
There.
No, that's great. That's fantastic. I didn't know if Tori or Brooklyn wanted to add anything to this, because we've kind of taken what you started with and built on it, and now we're back here. So I don't know if you guys or you two have experience with finding, like, having a hard time finding attendance, or was it easy for you? Any suggestions you can give people who may be looking?
I'm just going to jump in, I guess. So I think, one of the benefits is these things that you can hire really anybody you want. You can hire anybody who's able to work in Canada. I mean, they don't need to be a PSW. I mean, quite frankly, I don't hire PSWs. Quite frankly, I think you could teach a routine to anybody who's willing to learn. I've trained attendants on the ceiling lift. I've trained attendants on my coffin, and quite frankly, I've had better experience with them than I've had with PSWs in the past, right? So it depends on the person. It doesn't necessarily need to be that. I mean, you can go as far as, so when I was at school at Western, I hired nursing students. I put an ad out to the nursing program. I said I need nursing students to help me with overnights. I was looking for people who could monitor me and view. So I thought, why not nursing students? And then I was able to branch out and to just average students, anybody who could really do the job. Right now, I think my entire staff, none of them have any certifications. They're just people that I have that are in my community. It works out that way. It's very flexible in terms of who you can bring. The challenge, I might say, is that finding staff takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. So you've got to plan ahead. I think you got to interview them. You have to look up references, make sure they aren't going to run away at 4 a.m. So, and I sit down with staff and I have a very serious conversation. I say, guys, I need commitment. I need committed staff. I don't want you starting this job and then 1 week later saying, oh, I don't really want to work here anymore. I ask for commitment. I ask for staff to be committed. And if they tell me, well, I think this is going to come up, well then, sorry, I don't think I'm going to be able to hire you if in 1 month you're just going to disappear, right? So you have to be selective with who you bring on, and you have to have a serious chat. I think it's at the end of the day, if they don't show up to a shift, you're the one who's stuck in bed. If they don't show up to a shift, you're the one who's stuck home all night on your own. You have to really develop that relationship. And I think it's much better on direct funding because there's more at stake between you and the employer, right? It's not necessarily, they're not accountable to an agency, they're accountable to you, right? So they're going to really make the effort to do the job well.
I'm just going to jump real quick to Brooklyn and Tori, who I think may have wanted to add something real quick, and then we've got about 5 minutes left, so then we're going to jump to the Q&A. Really, I know time flies, but yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to make sure we got your thoughts.
Yeah, so I would love to add on to what Khalid said about having people long term. I found that mine actually, I've been on it since 2015, and I think I've only ever had like a couple instances where I had to hire new staff. A lot of my staff that still work with me are staff that I initially hired. Like my turnover has been very limited. I've had a lot of people stay with me a long time, which has been really nice, that consistency. Far better than the agency where I had new people every couple months, just constantly training, constantly adapting. And that's really changed. I feel like when I have been able to hire on, they stay long-term because we're able to really develop that employer-employee relationship that can be adaptable, that fits both of our needs. And it's a lot more intimate in that way, which is, I feel like, has been a really big benefit to having people stay longer and then me needing to hire less frequent. For me, luckily, I'm in Guelph, and so we have the university here, so there's usually a lot of opportunities for hiring students or hiring mature students that can kind of step in if they're staying in the area locally. And I think that's really been a beneficial for me, that when I've had to hire, I've never had issues trying to find people. You usually can find people through word of mouth or from other disabled people in the area, being able to offer up their, people that they know, people that they're connected to. And so I've been very fortunate to not have a lot of needing to recruit a lot of people, which has been, I know that I'm very lucky in that way. But I do think there are so many opportunities. And because you do have the decision to hire someone that is a PSW or not, I think that really does open up so much opportunity for hiring whoever fits your need, no matter what their education is.
Awesome. Tori, real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of it's been covered. I think all I wanted to say in terms of recruitment, if you're on the program, it's also really helpful to connect with other people who are on the program that may live close by. I know that a lot of people on direct funding share employees with other people that are on direct funding, which can really help. If I give someone part-time hours and another person on direct funding gives that same employee part-time hours, that's now a full-time job for them. So that works really well as well, just like connecting with other people in your area that you might be able to share resources with.
Thanks.
Jared and Tori, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and just read some of the questions that have been coming through the chat. And probably a common one is around the age for which you can access direct funding. Leisa, I do see here that you've noted it can be 16 and older, correct? That's correct. Okay, great.
That's right.
Go ahead, Leisa.
Sorry, Hamira, I was just saying, yeah, 16 and older is fine. You can apply when you turn 16. So individuals can apply as soon as they're 16. Also, if you live out of province and you're planning to move into province, you can apply at any time as long as you're 16 years or older.
Very good. And I believe we have answered the question around wait time, but just perhaps I can just rephrase it. So is there a wait time or wait list time for supportive housing? Can I have someone comment on that question?
Yes. So again, ASAC being the centralized point. So for anyone looking for any type of physical support services, they would apply through ASAC for all of the service providers. The wait list, again, it's very difficult to say, this is the time, this is where you are on the wait list. There's a host of factors that go into determining sometimes it's just availability of a vacancy, which, like we said before, sometimes we have quite a few, sometimes we don't have any. And then just depending on the person's situation that they're in, like I said, it's very difficult to say. I think on average, I mean, it could be a year or two, but that's just a very loose answer. It's really hard to say.
For those applying to school, we, can appreciate that sometimes that's at the last minute, depending on where you're accepted or residence or where you're going. So I do know that everyone that applied with March of Dimes, we were able to accommodate and expedite. And so that's something that we absolutely prioritize post-secondary applications.
Yeah, so I saw a question, so just real quick in the chat about whether SILT only provides services in Toronto. And so direct funding is Ontario. The ASAC, so the application for supportive housing and outreach is Toronto and York region. So if there is someone looking for student services in the York region, like Natalie said, March Dimes would be the one that would take that application. You would still apply through SILT, but it would go to March of Dimes for them to process, and usually it goes pretty quickly.
Thank you all for being part of the first panel today. That was great.